I buried my sister 35 years ago. Her name was Sharah. We called her Sari. She was 17 when the train she was on derailed and went off the tracks deep in the Sierra Nevada mountains, California, during a harsh winter storm in 1990. They told me 12 passengers died that night. Sharah was one of them. I identified her body at the morgue in Fresno, California. If you're watching this video, tell me where you're from or what time it is for you. I was 20 years old, barely an adult, and I had to tell our mother that her youngest child was gone. Last Tuesday, my phone rang at 2:00 in the morning. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but the area code was 213, Los Angeles. I almost didn't answer. At 55, you learn that nothing good comes from calls at that hour, but something made me reach for it. Maybe it was the same instinct that used to wake me when Sharah had night terrors as a kid. I answered. A voice said, "Ethan, is this Ethan?" I sat up in bed, my heart suddenly pounding against my ribs. The voice was uncertain, like someone who hadn't spoken in a very long time. But underneath that roughness, there was something that made my blood run cold. "Who is this?" I asked. There was breathing on the other end, heavy, labored. "It's me," the voice said. "It's Sharah." I dropped the phone. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely pick it up again. When I did, the line was still open. I could hear her breathing. "This isn't funny," I said, my voice cracking with rising anger. "Whoever you are, this is sick. My sister died 35 years ago." "I know," the voice said. "I know how long it's been. I just figured out who I am. I found something, a newspaper clipping about the train crash, and there's a picture of me, but the name under it says Sarah Miller. That's me, isn't it? I'm Sarah Miller." I couldn't breathe. The room was spinning. "Where are you?" I managed to say. I don't really know. A place called Skid Row. Someone told me that's what it's called. I've been here a long time. I think I live in a shelter on San Pedro Street, but I don't remember. I don't remember how I got here. I don't remember anything before about 8 years ago. Just waking up in a hospital, and they said I'd been found on the street, and I didn't have any ID, and I couldn't tell them my name. My mind was racing. This couldn't be real. This had to be some kind of scam. Someone who'd found Sarah's name somewhere and decided to torture me with it. "What do you remember?" I asked, testing her. Nothing clear, just feelings. "Sometimes I dream about snow, about being cold, about people screaming, and sometimes I dream about a house with a blue door, and someone. Someone used to make pancakes with blueberries. Every Sunday, I felt the tears start then, hot and sudden, because I remembered that house. I remembered that blue door, and I remembered Mom making those pancakes every Sunday morning without fail. And Sarah always ate twice as many as anyone else. "What do you look like?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Old," she said, and there was something like sadness in her voice. "Really old. My face is, I don't know how to describe it. Weathered, I guess. I've lived rough for a long time, but I found this picture in the newspaper from the accident. And even though it's 35 years old, I can see it. I can see myself in that face. We have the same eyes." "Sarah had a scar," I said, my voice shaking with old grief and new fury. "On her left shin, from when she fell out of the oak tree when she was 10. 9 stitches. There was a long pause. "I have a scar on my left shin. It's old, really old. I never knew where it came from. I was crying now, really crying in a way I hadn't cried since the day we buried her. "Give me your address," I said, firm and cold with a new purpose. "I'm coming to get you." "I don't think you should," she said quietly. I don't think I'm the person you remember. I don't remember being her. I'm just someone who's been living on the streets for longer than I can recall. I probably smell bad. I probably look scary. I just wanted to call because I thought someone should know that maybe I didn't die in that crash, that maybe there was a mistake. Tell me where you are, I said firmly, the anger fueling my voice. Right now. She gave me the address of a shelter on San Pedro Street. I wrote it down with shaking hands. It was a 6-hour drive from San Jose to Los Angeles. Longer if the traffic was bad. I looked at the clock. 2:15 in the morning. Stay there, I said. Don't go anywhere. I'm leaving right now. I'll be there by 9 a.m. at the latest. Do you understand? Don't leave. Okay, she said softly. Okay, Ethan, I'll wait. The line went dead. I sat there in the darkness of my bedroom for maybe 30 seconds, the anger and the sheer impossibility fighting in my chest. Then I was moving, pulling on clothes, grabbing my wallet and keys. My wife Laura stirred in bed. Ethan, what's wrong? I have to go to Los Angeles, I said, and my voice sounded strange, disconnected. Now, at 2:00 in the morning. Ethan, what's happened? I looked at her. This woman I'd been married to for 30 years, and I didn't know how to say it. How do you tell someone that the sister you buried 3 decades ago just called you on the phone? I'll explain later, I said. I have to go. I'm sorry. I was out the door before she could ask any more questions. The drive to Los Angeles was the longest 6 hours of my life. I kept the radio off because I couldn't stand the noise. My mind was spinning with possibilities, with impossibilities. The furious thought kept running. How could I have been so blind? Part of me was convinced this was a cruel hoax, that I'd get there and find some con artist who'd somehow learn details about Sarah's life. But another part of me, the part that had never fully accepted that my little sister was gone, was screaming that it was real. I thought about that day in the morgue. I was 20 years old, barely more than a kid myself, and they'd pulled back the sheet to show me a face that was battered and bruised from the crash. The body had been in the cold for over a day before they recovered it from the wreckage. There was a gash across the forehead, bruising everywhere, but I'd looked at the shape of the face, the color of the hair, the build of the body, and I'd said, yes, that's my sister. That's Sarah Miller. What if I'd been wrong? What if in my shock and grief, I'd identified the wrong body? The possibility made me feel sick with realization, and hot with fury at my younger, overwhelmed self. Because if that was true, then Sarah had been alive all this time, alive and suffering, alone, not knowing who she was, while I'd moved on with my life, while I'd married Laura, had kids, built a career, celebrated birthdays and Christmases and anniversaries, while Mom had died 5 years ago, still grieving for her youngest child. I pressed harder on the accelerator. I reached Los Angeles at 8:45 in the morning. Skid Row was exactly as bad as I'd heard, maybe worse. Boarded up buildings, people slumped in doorways, needles on the sidewalk. This was where my sister had been living. I found the shelter on San Pedro. It was a low, gray building that looked like it had been there forever. The front door was unlocked. Inside, it smelled like industrial cleaner trying and failing to mask the scent of too many unwashed bodies in too small a space. A woman sat behind a desk near the entrance. She looked up as I came in. Can I help you? I'm looking for someone, I said. Her name is... She might not remember her name, but she called me this morning. She said she's been staying here. She would have asked to use a phone around 2:00 a.m. She studied me for a moment, then nodded slowly. Sorry. Yeah, I remember. She was pretty worked up, asked if she could use the phone, said it was an emergency. Sweet woman. Sari been coming here on and off for about 6 years. Keeps to herself mostly. Is she here now? Check the common room. Through there. She pointed to a door on the left. I walked toward it. my heart hammering so hard I thought I might pass out. The common room was a large space with mismatched chairs and tables, a television playing quietly in one corner. There were maybe a dozen people scattered around. Most of them looked up as I entered, their eyes wary. And then I saw her. She was sitting alone at a table near the window, her back to me. I could see gray hair, longer than it should be, pulled back in a loose braid. She wore a stained fleece jacket that had seen better days, and her shoulders were hunched, like she was trying to make herself smaller. I walked toward her slowly. My legs felt like they didn't quite work right. "Sharah," I said. She turned around. The face that looked at me was nothing like the face I remembered. This woman was weathered and worn, with deep lines around her eyes and mouth. Her skin was the kind of brown that comes from years of living outside. There was a scar across her left forehead that hadn't been there before. She looked at least 65, not 52, but the eyes. God, the eyes were the same, green with flecks of hazel, exactly like our father's eyes, exactly like Sarah's eyes. "Ethan," she said, and her voice cracked. I couldn't speak. I just stared at her. This woman who might be my sister, this ghost from 35 years ago. She stood up slowly, like her joints hurt. She was thinner than Sharah had been, and shorter somehow, though that might just have been the way she held herself. But when she looked at me, there was something in her expression that made my breath catch. "You came," she said. "I wasn't sure you would." "Show me your shin," I said. My voice came out harsh, demanding, still edged with my internal fury. "The left one." She hesitated, then rolled up the cuff of her worn pants. There, running along her shin, was a scar, old and faded, but unmistakable, about 3 inches long, right where Sarah's scar had been. I felt my knees go weak. I reached out and grabbed the edge of the table to steady myself. "I think I need to sit down," I said. She pulled out a chair for me and I collapsed into it. She sat back down across from me, watching me carefully like I might bolt at any moment. "Tell me about the train crash," I said. "Tell me what you remember." "I don't remember the crash itself," she said slowly, "but I have nightmares. Always the same. I'm on a train and it's snowing, and the train is trying to slow down, but we're sliding, and then people are screaming and it's so cold. So cold, I think I might die from it, and then nothing. Just darkness for a long time." She rubbed her face with both hands. "The next thing I remember clearly is waking up in a hospital. A nurse told me I'd been brought in from the streets, that I'd been unconscious. They said I'd been beaten, that someone had robbed me. But I didn't remember that either. I couldn't remember anything. Not my name, not where I was from, nothing. They kept me for 3 days, ran tests, but they couldn't find anything physically wrong with me beyond some old injuries. Head trauma, they said, possibly from years ago." "What year was this?" I asked. 2017, she said. "April. I think. I didn't even know what year it was. I had to ask. My mind was racing. 2017. That was 27 years after the crash. What had happened in those 27 years? Where had Sharah been? And before that?" I pressed. "You really don't remember anything?" "Sometimes I get flashes," she said. "Little pieces that don't make sense. I remember being cold a lot, living rough somewhere, mountains maybe, and I remember. I think I remember working manual labor, farming, maybe, getting paid in cash, but it's all foggy, like trying to remember a dream." She looked down at her hands, and I noticed they were scarred and calloused, the hands of someone who'd done hard physical work. "For a long time, I didn't even try to remember," she said quietly. "So I just survived day to day, found shelters when I could, slept outside when I couldn't. There are gaps in my memory, even from the last 8 years. Sometimes I'd realize weeks had passed and I couldn't account for them. The doctors I've seen, the ones at the free clinics, they said I might have some kind of dissociative disorder, probably from trauma. When did you start trying to remember? I asked. About 6 months ago, she said. I met this woman at the shelter, a volunteer. She was going through boxes of old newspapers, sorting them for recycling, and she showed me one from January 1990. Said, "Can you believe this was 35 years ago?" And something about that date made me feel, I don't know, strange, like it meant something. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a carefully folded piece of newspaper, yellowed with age. She unfolded it gently, like it might disintegrate in her hands, and pushed it across the table to me. It was a front-page article about the train crash. 12 dead in Sierra disaster, the headline read, and there in a small photo grid of the victims was Sarah's face, young, smiling, a high school photo that Mom had given to the newspaper. I looked at that picture for a long time, she said, and something clicked. I knew that face, not from a mirror. I don't look like that anymore, but from somewhere deep inside and the name underneath, Sarah Miller. I kept saying it over and over, Sarah, Sari. And it felt right. It felt like my name. I stared at the newspaper clipping, at my sister's young face smiling back at me. I started looking for more information, she continued. There's a library near here. The librarian helped me search old records. I found the obituary. I found the list of survivors' family members left behind. Your name was there, Ethan Miller, brother, and there was an address in San Jose. It took me 3 months to work up the courage to call. I didn't know if you'd even still be there. I didn't know if you'd believe me. I'm not sure I do believe you, I said, and it came out harsher than I meant it to, dripping with fury at the universe. I'm not sure I can believe you because if you're Sarah, then I identified the wrong body. I told our mother the wrong child was dead. Do you understand what that means? She flinched, but she nodded. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I know I can't imagine what this is like for you. Mom's dead, I said, and I heard my voice break. She died 5 years ago. She spent 30 years thinking you were gone. She never got over it. And if you're really Sarah, then she died not knowing you were alive. The tears were streaming down my face now, tears of grief and frustrated anger. The woman across from me, Sarah, maybe Sarah, was crying, too, silent tears running down her weathered face. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. We sat there in that shelter common room, 2 broken adults crying while people walked past and pretended not to notice. Finally, I wiped my face with my sleeve and looked at her, really looked at her. We need to do a DNA test, I said. That's the only way to know for sure. She nodded. Okay, yes. I want to know, too. I need to know. I pulled out my phone and started searching. There was a place in downtown Los Angeles that did same-day DNA testing. Private lab, expensive, but they could have results in 48 hours. I called them and made an appointment for 3 that afternoon. Come on, I said, standing up. Let's go get this done. She stood too, moving stiffly. As we walked out of the shelter together, I realized how much shorter she was than me now. Sarah had been almost my height when she died, or when I thought she died. This woman was at least 4 inches shorter, but then years of malnutrition and living rough could do that to a person. We drove to the lab in silence. I kept glancing at her in the passenger seat, trying to see my little sister in this weathered stranger. Sometimes I could see it, the shape of her ear, the way she rubbed her thumb against her fingers when she was nervous, a habit Sarah had always had. Other times, she looked like a complete stranger. The DNA test was simple. Cheek swabs for both of us. Paperwork. Payment via credit card. The lab technician said they'd call me with the results in 48 hours. As we left the lab, I realized I hadn't thought about what came next. "Where are you staying tonight?" I asked her. "The shelter, I guess. Same place." I looked at her, at this woman who might be my sister, standing on the street corner in clothes that had been worn too many times and shoes that were falling apart. And I couldn't do it. I couldn't just leave her there. "Come on," I said. "I'm getting a hotel room. You're staying with me. You don't have to do that." "I know. Come on." I found a hotel near Santa Monica, got a room with 2 beds. The desk clerk gave us a look, me in my clean clothes and her looking like she'd been living rough. But I didn't care. I paid and got the key. In the room, I ordered pizza while she took a shower. She was in there for almost 45 minutes. When she came out, her hair was wet and clean, slicked back from her face, and she'd shaved off a patchy beard. And suddenly, I could see it more clearly. The shape of her face, the set of her jaw, Sarah's jaw. We ate pizza in near silence, the television playing quietly in the background. Finally, she spoke. "Thank you," she said, "for this, for not just, for believing me enough to try." "I haven't decided what I believe yet," I said, "but I needed to know one way or another." She nodded. "Can I ask you something?" "What? What was I like before? When I was Sarah?" The question hit me like a physical blow. I sat down my pizza and leaned back against the headboard. "You were good," I said after a moment. "Really good. Kind, you know. You were the kid who always brought home stray dogs, who cried when you saw injured birds. You wanted to be a teacher. You were going to college in San Diego that year in September. You were so excited about it." I could see tears forming in her eyes again. "You were funny," I continued, "always making Mom laugh, even when she was having a bad day. And you were brave. When Dad left when you were 10, you told me we'd be okay. You said we'd take care of Mom together. And we did. I wish I could remember," she whispered. "I wish I could remember being that person." "Maybe you will," I said, injecting a deliberate note of forgiveness and hope. "Maybe when you know for sure who you are, it'll come back." But I wasn't sure I believed that. That night, I lay awake in the hotel bed, listening to her breathe in the bed next to mine. Steady, deep breaths, the breathing of someone who'd finally found a safe place to sleep. I thought about calling Laura, but I didn't know what to say. How do you explain this on the phone? So, I sent her a text instead. "I'm okay. I'll explain everything when I get home. I love you." She wrote back immediately. "I love you, too. Be safe." The next day, we didn't talk much. We got breakfast at a diner. I watched her eat like she hadn't had a real meal in months, which she probably hadn't. And then we walked around the Santa Monica Pier. It seemed important somehow to not just sit in the hotel room waiting for the phone to ring. As we walked, she told me more about her life on the streets, the shelters she'd stayed in, the people she'd met, the winters that almost killed her. She told me about finding small jobs here and there, day labor that paid cash, about the times she'd been robbed, beaten, thrown in jail for loitering, about the constant fog in her mind, the feeling of being lost in her own life. "I always felt like I was waiting for something," she said as we stood looking out at the ocean. "Like there was something I was supposed to do, somewhere I was supposed to be, but I could never remember what it was." The phone rang at 2:30 on Thursday afternoon. We were back in the hotel room. I'd checked out, planning to start the drive home, but I delayed leaving until we got the call. I answered on the second ring. "Hello, Mr. Miller. This is Dr. Samuel. From the Los Angeles DNA lab. I'm calling with your results." My hand was shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. The woman sitting on the bed across from me, maybe Sarah, was watching me with wide eyes. "Yes," I said. Yes, this is Ethan Miller. The results of your DNA comparison test are conclusive. The probability of siblingship between you and the second party is 927%. In other words, Mr. Miller, you are biological siblings. The room tilted. I sat down hard on the bed. You're certain? I asked, though I knew it was a stupid question. Yes, sir. These results are definitive. Would you like me to email you the full report? Yes, please. I gave her my email address, thanked her, and hung up. I looked across at my sister who I'd buried 35 years ago, my sister who'd been alive this whole time. It's you, I said. You're really Sharah. She let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. I'm Sharah, she repeated, like she was trying to believe it herself. I'm Sharah Miller. And then we were both crying again. And this time I crossed the space between us and pulled her into a hug. She felt so thin, so fragile in my arms. But she was real. She was alive. We held on to each other for a long time. Finally, I pulled back. We need to figure out what happened, I said. How you survived the crash. Where you've been all this time. I know someone who might be able to help, Sharah said. There's a doctor at the free clinic who's been helping me. Dr. Evelyn Reed. She specializes in trauma cases. She might have some answers. We went to see Dr. Reed that afternoon. She was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and the patient manner of someone who'd heard every story there was to hear. I explained everything. The crash, the identification, the phone call, the DNA test. She listened without interrupting, taking notes. I'd like to examine you if that's all right. Sharah, she said when I finished. She nodded. She had her lie on the examination table and she conducted a thorough physical exam. She paid particular attention to old scars and healed fractures. She used a small light to check her eyes, tested her reflexes, felt along her skull. You have extensive evidence of old trauma, she said when she was done. Multiple healed fractures, ribs, left arm, right ankle, significant scarring on your torso and back, and there's a depression in your skull here. She touched the back of her head gently, consistent with a severe impact injury. From the train crash? I asked. Possibly, but here's what I think happened based on what you've told me and what I'm seeing. She pulled up a chair and sat down, her expression serious. I think Sharah did survive the initial crash, but she was badly injured. Head trauma, possibly unconscious in the chaos and the snow. In the darkness, she was likely thrown from the train. The other passengers who survived said it was complete chaos, that it was hard to see anything. I think Sharah ended up away from the main wreckage, possibly in the snow. She paused, choosing her words carefully. The body you identified, Ethan, I think it was another passenger, someone of similar build and age, in the state the bodies were in after the crash, after being in the cold with the facial trauma. It would have been easy to make a mistake, especially for someone who was grieving and in shock. I felt sick. She was right. I knew she was right. So, what happened to Sharah? I asked. I think she was found by someone, maybe a farmer passing by, maybe someone from one of the small towns along that route, someone who didn't take her to a hospital either because they were involved in something illegal themselves or because they saw an opportunity. A young woman with no memory, no ID, easy to exploit. You think someone kept her? I asked, my voice hollow. I think someone used her, she said quietly. For labor, most likely. There are operations in remote areas of California, illegal farming, small manufacturing, off-the-books construction. They use workers who won't ask questions, won't go to the authorities, workers who don't even know who they are. Sharah was staring at the floor, her hands clenched together. That would explain the gaps in your memory. Dr. Reed continued. Years of untreated head trauma, possible additional injuries, malnutrition, exposure to drugs or alcohol as a coping mechanism. Your brain was trying to protect itself by shutting down. So somewhere around 2017, I said slowly, she got away, or they let her go, or they thought she was more trouble than she was worth. Dr. Reed nodded. 35 years of hard labor would age anyone significantly. If she was starting to have medical problems, memory issues, they might have just dumped her in Los Angeles. And then she lived on the streets for another 8 years, I said, my voice heavy with fury and pain. While I was in San Jose, while I could have been looking for her. You couldn't have known, Sharah said quietly. You thought I was dead. We all thought I was dead. Your mother, Dr. Reed said to me, she's passed. I nodded, not trusting my voice. I'm sorry, but Ethan, you need to understand something. The woman sitting here, she's your sister genetically, but she's not the same person she was at 17. She's lived a life you can't even imagine. She's survived things that would have killed most people. She's Sharah, but she's also someone new, someone who's been forged by 35 years of trauma and survival. I looked at my sister, really looked at her, at the gray in her hair and the lines on her face and the weariness in her eyes. She was right. This wasn't the girl I'd said goodbye to in 1990. This was a survivor. What do we do now? I asked. That's up to you, Dr. Reed said. But I'd recommend some intensive therapy for Sharah. Processing this kind of trauma, rebuilding identity, it's a long journey, and you both might benefit from family therapy as well, learning how to be siblings again after all this time. We left the clinic in silence. It was getting dark, and the streets of Skid Row were coming alive with their nighttime population. Come home with me, I said as we stood on the sidewalk, my voice soft with forgiveness for the past. Come to San Jose. Stay with Laura and me. We have a spare room. We can figure this out together. She looked at me, and I could see the fear in her eyes. I don't know how to be someone's sister, she said. I don't know how to be part of a family. I've been alone for so long. So, we'll learn, I said. Both of us. We'll figure it out. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. Okay, she said. Okay. Ethan, I'll try. We drove back to San Jose the next morning. The 6-hour drive felt different this time. I kept glancing over at her in the passenger seat. This sister who'd come back from the dead. We didn't talk much, but it was a comfortable silence. When we pulled into my driveway, Laura was waiting on the porch. I'd called her the night before, explained everything. She'd cried on the phone, told me to bring her home. She came down the steps as we got out of the car, and she looked at Sharah for a long moment. Then she opened her arms. Welcome home, Sharah, she said. She hesitated, then let her hug her. I saw her shoulders shake, and I knew she was crying again. That was 3 months ago. It hasn't been easy. Sharah has nightmares almost every night. She struggles with crowds, with loud noises, with being inside for too long. She sees a therapist twice a week, and we're working through decades of trauma, one session at a time. But she's remembering things. Small things at first. The taste of Mom's blueberry pancakes. The name of the cat we had when we were kids. The way the house used to smell in the summer. Last week she remembered a trip to Disneyland when she was 10. Remembered the plush doll I'd saved up to buy her. I'm starting to feel like her, she told me yesterday as we sat on the back deck watching the sun set over the hills. Like Sharah, like I'm not just someone who has her DNA. Like I'm actually becoming her again, or maybe becoming someone new who includes her. Does that make sense? Yeah, I said. It makes sense. My kids have met her. My 2 daughters and my son, the nieces and nephew she never knew she had. They're cautious, curious, kind. My granddaughter, who's 4, has decided that Sharah is her best friend. Sharah smiles more when the kids are around. We've talked about what to do about the grave. There's a headstone with Sharah's name on it in the cemetery in San Jose. We've discussed having it removed or changed or leaving it there as a memorial to the person Sharah was before. We haven't decided yet. There's no rush. Last week, Sharah got a part-time job at a small craft store. She's good with fabrics. She's discovered they don't ask questions, don't judge. She comes home with thread under her fingernails and stories about customers. She's learning to be a person again. And I'm learning, too. I'm learning that grief doesn't work the way you think it does. I spent 35 years grieving my sister, and now she's here, but I still feel the loss of who she was. I'm grieving for the 17-year-old who got on that train. I'm grieving for the life she should have had, but I'm also grateful because she's alive. Against all odds, through everything, she survived. And maybe that's what matters most. She asked me the other day if I ever blamed myself for identifying the wrong body. Every day, I told her honestly, the confession tasting like bitter ash. Every single day since you called me. Don't, she said, her eyes gentle with forgiveness. You were 20. You just lost your sister. You did the best you could. I should have looked more carefully. If you had, they might never have found me. I might have died in those mountains, working for whoever took me. At least this way. I'm here. I'm alive. And I have a brother who drove 6 hours in the middle of the night because a stranger said his name. She's right, I suppose. I'm trying to forgive myself. It's harder than it sounds. Sometimes late at night, I lie awake and think about all the years we lost, all the birthdays and holidays, all the moments we should have shared. I think about Mom and how happy she would have been to know she was alive. That's the hardest part, knowing she died without knowing. But then I remind myself what Dr. Reed said. The past is the past. We can't change it. All we can do is move forward. So that's what we're doing, day by day, moment by moment, learning how to be siblings again, or maybe learning how to be siblings for the first time, because we're both different people now. Last night, we sat on the deck after dinner, and Sharah looked up at the stars. Do you think Mom knows? She asked. Wherever she is, do you think she knows I'm alive? I think she does, I said. So I think she's been watching over you this whole time, keeping you alive until you could find your way back. She smiled at that. It's still a rare thing, her smile, but it's getting more common. I'm glad you answered the phone, she said. Me too, Sharah, me too. And I am, despite everything. The pain, the confusion, the grief that somehow still exists alongside the joy. I'm grateful because my sister came back from the dead. And that's a miracle I never thought I'd see. I learned something through all of this. I learned that hope isn't foolish, even when it seems impossible. I learned that people are more resilient than we give them credit for. I learned that family isn't just about shared memories. It's about choosing to show up day after day, even when it's hard. And I learned that it's never too late for a second chance. Sarah's still finding herself. She may never remember everything. She may always carry the scars of those lost years. But she's here. She's alive. She's home. And that's enough. That's more than enough. That's everything.